And we are live, joined this hour by Carlos Callejo, who is just a world famous, legendary muralist, painter, organizer, all kinds of amazing things. Carlos, I want to ask you about your trips to Cuba. I want to ask you about some murals you have here in Los Angeles. I want to ask you about the work you're doing with the Chicano Moratorium. I want to ask you about all these things. Before we get to any of them, I want to ask
Okay.
you how you got started. Like how did your journey with the visual arts begin?
Wow. Okay. My visual arts journey, my career. I it's hard to pinpoint like an exact date because I think it's been an artistic qualities is been an innate trait of my character. As early on as a little baby, I used to always play with clay and things like that, and always creating some. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think that I call that innate. I think more on the academic part of it. I didn't start painting until I was in high school, like late in high school, and I was doing more like drawing. But in my high school years, I used to draw a lot, but I there was a lot of symbolism that went along. So when I took up art classes, I used to get discouraged from the teachers about not becoming an artist because I guess back in those days there was this two big schools of thought. One was art for art's sake, and the other one art having a purpose or agitprop type of art for like social conscious and political. And I was doing the other, but so I kind of took it at heart. I was gonna be an artist. Maybe I was gonna be an illustrator. So now, of course, now as an adult, I realize both are valid, and it's a combination of both. The aesthetics and then the subject matter. So that was very early on, and that sort of developed my, you know, my my uh, my type of work, my type of art.
Yeah. So where does this story begin? I mean, where like
Where does
you're
it
not
begin?
looking in space. So where did you
Okay,
start? Where did you
real
start?
quickly, I started painting, I guess, in high school. I started doing murals right after high school. Actually I started more doing silk screen. I was doing a lot of political posters in the late '60s, early '60s. A lot of political posters, the type of posters that we used to go out snipe, what you call sniping, announcing an event, a campaign, an injustice,
Yeah.
and that's how it started. And it wasn't murals was a little bit after that, more like in my college years, only because a silk screen was very toxic.
Mm. And this was in Los Angeles.
This was in Los Angeles, yes.
Um, so tell us about your college experience.
My college experience. Okay, my college experience, like I said, I was doing a lot of posters and locked up in a garage. I was living in a garage where there was no ventilation. And when I say it was toxic, the type of chemicals you use for doing silkscreen, there was a lot of thinner and stuff, and so it was real toxic. I used to literally come out of my garage and sort of just breathe out and see little fumes, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself." And that is where my career into muralism and into public art started. Uh, I kind of donated all the posters to an agency that now is now known as self-help graphics, and that's sort of where they started Silkscreen. I gave them all my Silkscreen equipment to Sister Karen. So it's that's sort of, yes, in a nutshell. My I guess my university college days, I also became real involved with the Chicano movement. My activism, joined Mecha, and doing was a lot of activity. In a nutshell, that's what I.
Okay, so at what point in time was this when you joined Mecha? Like what year was this?
Oh boy, God, that's tough. Okay, I was actually in UMass. United Mexican American Students in high school.
Wow.
And actually, I was one of the founders of UMass at my high school. Do you want to hear the story?
Absolutely.
Okay. After 68 walkouts, you heard of the walkouts? Went to Roosevelt High School. And after the 68 walkouts, I was transferred out to another high school, my senior year of my high school. And I got sent to Wilson High School, which is a predominantly, well, it's an East LA school, but there's more whites and more Asians in it compared to Roosevelt, and more conservative, and I guess if the lack of a better word. Um, and after being a participant in the walkouts, I was very involved, and I was also very involved. I was part of a member of Upward Bound, which is a college bound program. And so I was, to make a long story short, I was influenced and had a lot of connections. So when I got transferred out to Wilson, it was early in a semester, and it was traditional. It was real common that the beginning of the semester back then they used to have a boys vice principal and a girls vice principal. It was very common to do this assemblies to talk about the rules and regulations and the dress codes and dress standards that was going to take an effect for the rest of the semester. And that's sort of where I came in that period. And so I was a newcomer. I was like a barrio kid, not trying to make trouble because I was in a different school. I was going to want to get my ass beat by gang, because there were, not more than gangs. There used to be also car clubs and these social clubs. And so I was trying to keep low key. But what happened there? So I was in this assembly, and Mr. Royer, who's the boys' vice principal, was doing this speech. And I guess the rules and regulations were a little harsh. So the student body in the auditorium were making little comments and little faces that they were being too strict. And Mr. Royer proceeded and said something into the effect that it said that, now you have to understand, you think that these things are strict, but these rules and regulations makes us better. And then he proceeded to say, and we are better in comparison to the other East LA schools. And he specifically mentioned Roosevelt and Garfield. He didn't mention Lincoln. They were just close by. But anyway, and he goes, and the reason we're better than them is that we're more closer to an Anglo way of life. Well, this sparked my attention. And I said, huh? And then to me, it was a racist comment. And so, and after, coming out of the walkouts of Roosevelt, I said, to myself, because I wasn't really paying attention to myself, I said, he really didn't say that. I must have misunderstood or I couldn't believe he had said that. And then I also looked in the back to see the reaction of the student body, and there was no reactions. I said, no, it was me. I must have heard wrong. But it really bothered me. So I what I proceeded to do is I raised my hand, basically to ask him if he could please repeat his statement. And when I did that, I got ignored, and I became persistent, and I kept my hand up, and he finally sort of looked at me because I was kind of in the front of the auditorium because of my aisles back, so he couldn't ignore me. He couldn't, he was being. So what he proceeded to do, actually, he just said, he made a comment. He said, "Young man, you might as well put your hand down because I know for a fact that you're not part of our family yet. I know, I know that you've recently been transferred out from another school." So, all right. So I proceeded to, lay it go. So after the auditorium, after the assembly, when my class was going out, I really had it. I was bothered me. So I went up to him to ask him, and he was talking to another teacher, and I think the teacher was also talking to him about the subject matter, which I got to meet the teacher, by the way, later on, Mr. Walters, red hair math teacher. And of course, I'm the student, they're the adults, so out of respect, I waited to their conversation, but I had to go back. So I was like being, kind of jittery, I say, like I have to get back. And what he did, instead of recognizing me, what he did, he told Mr. Walters, "Excuse me," and all he did is made a gesture. What he did is put his hand on his back pocket of his pants by where his wallet was, and turned around and looked at me straight in my face and said, "How much would it cost to take a bus to TJ?" Well, right then and then, I said, "Oh, this so and so, actually said that he's a racist." So I didn't make nothing. I just closed my mouth and walked out. Well, little did he know that I had been involved in the walkouts, and I had been involved in, an upward bound. So what I did that evening, I proceeded to call all my friends, urban affairs, different people that I knew, because after the walkouts, a lot of parents had formed like defense funds because people got busted at the walkouts, and I was in contact with them. Well, anyway, the next day, his whole office was bombarded with community people, and so as I was walking into his office the next day, he was in the middle of saying that young man misunderstood me. And I really basically said, "Listen, Mr. Royer, I don't really want to make a big deal out of this, but these are important people, and they took time out of their uh, busy schedule to be here. So I don't care what happens, but all I want is, so don't be telling me that I misunderstood, because then that makes me feel bad after bringing these people in. All of that, just have to prevent it." So anyway, so my point is that after that, my high school semester is when it changed my whole life. Then I wasn't recognized in school. I wasn't recognized as a Carlos, just like a regular student. I was called Mr. Callejo, and so it kind of earned me the respect. And they said, "Well, that's the troublemaker." So that sort of changed my pattern for my life. What all that story has to do with Mecha, which started, was that from then on, a lot of students would say, "Oh, go right on." And I started telling them how we had an UMass chapter at Roosevelt, and we should have one here to prevent these things. And so they were interested about building an UMass. So that is where UMass at Wilson High School started. UMass eventually became MECHA, from after the Plan de Santa Barbara, the conference in Santa Barbara University. And so, but prior to that, I guess it was 69, yeah, about 60, well, 68 was when this, yeah, 16, about 69, something, maybe 70, 71 is when the official name of UMass changed to MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil de Chicanos de Aztlán. I'm sorry for a long story, but
No, no,
it's
no, no.
related,
It's fantastic.
it's related to the MECHA
So,
situation.
so in what grade were you in Roosevelt when you participated in the walkouts?
At the Wakas, I was in the 11th grade.
Okay, so you transferred to Wilson,
On my 12th grade.
12th grade.
My senior.
My mother attended Wilson.
Oh, all right, all right.
Yeah. She was actually there during the walkout. She didn't know what's going on.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Wilson was actually the ones that jumped the gun. I
Yeah,
just did a mural. I just did a mural in front of the old Wilson, which is now El Sereno Junior High, before it went up the hill,
right.
before they got. But there's a mural, and I will email you that mural. But there is a mural precisely about, specifically about Wilson's participation in the walkout, because they jumped the gun. And actually, Wilson was actually the least politically conscious campus of all the other campuses. Yeah.
So can you tell? I mean, I know from just from I mean I just know from stories and stuff like that Wilson jumped the gun, but I never heard why or what happened or
Oh, why they
so
jumped?
why did Wilson jump the gun? What happened?
The reason that is because a play that there was they had scheduled a field trip to go see. Back then there was a movie and there was a play called Barefoot in the Park, and there was some students, a bunch of students going to go see the play, and it got canceled, and they got pissed off, and they walked out early. Basically, they jumped the gun. I think it was on March 12th. It was that's when it was going to be scheduled, where all the high schools were going to walk out, and I think Wilson jumped the gun, and they walked out on March the 3rd. So it was some days before the, the main event or the main program, just because
So,
of a cancellation of a play.
so what was like the response of the schools when they jumped the gun? Was everyone mad? Or,
Everybody
I
was
mean, I get it.
everybody
We
was
don't
pissed
really get
off.
the details of stuff like this.
Everybody was pissed off. They didn't want to miss their barefoot in the park.
Oh man. All right. Okay. So now you were you actually there during the plan to Santa Barbara in the forming of Metro?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't at the Plan de Santa Barbara. That was an UMaS statewide conference where they changed the name. I
Mm.
had been involved in many other statewide conferences, and but not on that one. No.
So what was it like in those early days of Metro? Like what like can you just give us like a feel for like the excitement or the energy that was around at the time?
Uh, uh, it was very exciting. I think there was very empowering, and I'll tell you why. I went to Cal State Los Angeles University here in Los Angeles, and as it was probably the most activist chapter of in the nation for Mecha. It now Northridge has the biggest Chicano studies department out of all everybody in the nation, but it's based on our model, and it was a Mecha produced kind of model and methodology, and we had so much power that, like for instance, to hire Chicano professionals, professors to teach, they had to go through Mecha to get their approval before they could teach. Can you imagine that? You know that the students having that much control. So yeah, it was very, yeah, very exciting.
So what was that like to be able to kind of sit down in the hiring processes?
It was so fine, just empowering. Like I said, I wasn't, to tell the truth, back then in the university days, even though I was a Mecha participant, I was more of a participant than a leader. I was just fresh out of high school. There was already students there that had been at the university level way before, and so that was the leadership. I actually was being influenced by them, and I looked up to them. So I was more of a participant than, yeah.
Leader. Um, all right, so let's start getting so
Let's go to my art. Yes, we got too much into it.
yeah. No, I mean,
I'm sorry, but when you ask me these questions, I have to give you reference. So I'm just.
oh no, don't apologize. This is really good. We're trying to get some of these oral histories and like getting the first hand account of these things. Actually, before we get into your art, I want to ask you about the other major kind of upheaval of the time, which was the moratorium. What was your
Uh-huh.
participation in? What was your participation in the moratorium?
On the Chicano moratorium, actually, I was also very young. I was fresh out of high school. I graduated in the fall of '69, summer of '69, and went to the fall of '69. Went to to the university in fall '69. So in the 1970, I was already in at the university, and that's when the Chicano moratorium was August 29th, 1970. So I was very young, and like I said, more of a participant than a leader. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us about like just because this is designed for like a wide cross section of audience, and not everybody is
Okay. All right. Want to hear my experience, my life experience at
yeah,
the actual event? Is that what it is?
yeah.
Okay. What? Okay. It's a funny story actually,
Okay.
because well, remember I was telling you that I started doing silk screen. So I used to silk screen chair flags, chair, comandante chair flags,
Mhm.
and we would sell them. We would sell them and make like as a fundraiser for our Mecha chapter,
Yeah.
basically. So I took a lot of these Mecha flags, but the interesting thing about it was that I was really impressed because there was this young lady who was very beautiful, by the way. Out of my league, let's put it that way. That had bought a new car, and he wanted to test it out. He goes, "Hey, I'm interested in going to the moratorium. So do you want to come?" And so I rode with her. to the event. Once the riot broke, once the whole fiasco broke out with the policing attack, and people kind of rioted at Whittier Boulevard, I left her alone. I said, forget it. I wanted to go hang around with so I went to where all the mess was. So that was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom was actually on a double date at the moratorium. So
Oh, really? I think what they did.
that was kind of it's kind of fun. People don't realize, like, everyone thinks of it as so, like, I mean, it was very, it was a great historic moment, but, like, people also had their lives, and people don't really think about it in those terms. They just think that, like,
Right, right.
people just like marching almost like statues or something like that, just like, think about these
And
are
of course, well, and of course, I mean, it was very impressive. It's For me, it's very impressive. I think after that event, it sort of changed. It sort of it contributed a lot to my subject matter in my art. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that was the biggest protest of its time in the city of Los Angeles. It was, like 30 something thousand people gathering for the protest of the Vietnam War in general, but in particular, the high death rate of Chicanos dying in Vietnam. So it was a big event.
Yeah. And how did the assassination of Ruben Salazar, how did that impact you? Like, how did you, what were your, like, what?
Uh, how did it impact me? Well, I had seen Ruben Salazar prior to the event and knew a little bit about him, but like I said, I'm just a student. So it impacted. Well, there was two other people that got killed that day, Diaz and Ward. Um, so those impact me. But how did it impact me? Well, I think it impacted me more after once it set in, because after the inquest, because they did an inquest to see how he was killed, and for me it was obvious that he was like almost assassinated. I mean, to me, but we're never gonna know about that, because why was he targeted? And just the events leading to his death. I don't know if whoever's going to view this know about this, but it was a tear gas canister that took half of his face off. So it normally the procedures. Well, there's a lot to it. The procedures for a tear gas canister, when you put something down, when you put the projectile, anyway, it has to be up or down, and it was just right to his face. So there's conspiracy theories, there's theories, and what transpired there.
Yeah. So what about the, I mean, just the general impact of having, you know, a peaceful gathering, a concert, kind of a march. Uh,
Well, yeah, no. Prior to the Chicano moratorium, there had been a lot of demonstrations and more militant type of demonstrations by young kids, by young radical type of people. But this event wasn't that at all. This event was a nation Chicano moratorium, and so there was a lot of families, that lot of grandparents, a lot of parents with strollers, and so it was. So the whole thing had been planned in order to avoid any conflict or any violence, and so I think it was basically perpetrated by the policing type of agencies or provocateurs. I don't know if you know this. What happened? But basically, their excuse to attack the rally, because it wasn't the march; it was after the march. It was a marching rally, so there was entertainment. There was a stage in the park when an incident happened across the street of the park, and some people had stolen some beer out of a liquor store, whatever, and that was the excuse for the police to come in, and that's where the whole thing broke out. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. All right. So, well, I want to get into your career now. So let's talk about your career and
Oh,
some of the murals that you painted.
okay. Yeah. Let's get back into it. Let's get to the art.
But
You know.
but like, you come out of a time period where you have a lot of contemporaries, you have a lot of people making art across the city. But I mean, maybe it's fair to say, maybe it's unfair to say, I don't know. But like, a lot of people seems like they were influenced by the Mexican muralist movement.
Right.
like Siqueiros, Rivera,
Yeah,
and
right.
all that. And so it's kind of interesting. Like before the pandemic, there were a number of articles coming out saying that Mexican muralist movement might have been the most influential art movement in the 20th century, which to me is relatively obvious because, like that muralist, the Mexican muralist movement, it was hugely influential on people all across the world, not just Chicanos. I mean, like all across the world. It's a very simple idea: paint your history on a wall, right? Um, but uh, but yeah, so can you speak to like how influential that movement was to you and your contemporaries?
I was very influential. I think it plays a very significant role in our aspirations, and it kind of yeah, no, it was very inspirational. Um, it's I I kind of sometimes say, the Chicano mural movement sort of owes its roots to that whole post Mexican Revolution uh, effort, um, but it takes in a different form because when you talk about the Tres Grandes, yes, they were very political. They were doing a lot of murals, actually a lot of like fresco type of murals, but which brings a very technical aspects to mural making, where the Chicano murals were actually out in the streets. Frescoes have to be indoors, protected by the elements. So that was a difference. Also, and the Tres Maestros had people working for them, where Chicano murals was actually a very collective, community oriented thing. So that's sort of different, but they were influenced by the Tres Grandes, by Siqueiros, Orozco, Rivera.
Yeah, yeah. So can you talk a little bit about like what that was like to work in like kind of like in a collective fashion? I mean, like not just what it's like to work in, but like where did that idea come from? That wait a minute, like we're making these art pieces, and we should do it in a way that would like kind of like
Uh,
was in the past,
well,
for lack of better.
uh, I'll tell you more about me and
Yeah, yeah,
what got me there. You have to realize that the times were very. There was a lot of turmoil, and actually now looking back at it, actually very influential because I don't think the new generations have that. You know, so there was a lot of turmoil. So it basically it was a part where you wanted to express your feelings and your consciousness, but not in a studio, out in the public. And since murals are exposed to the general public, you have access to literally the public, thousands upon thousands of people. So you're going to be viewed by these people, instead of having your work in a gallery or in a museum. So it was a way to bring out a way of like an open forum of the issues at hand, the current issues going on at the time. So that sort of was one of the one of the leading roles why what I call the mural renaissance sort of began here in the United States. And it wasn't just Los Angeles. It was big metropolitan cities like New York and Chicago, too, also.
yeah. So tell us about your own work. Tell us about some of your own murals that can be found around. Let's start with Los Angeles. So with the city of Los Angeles.
Uh, in Los Angeles, well, let's see. One of the okay, let's see. One of the very very first murals that I did back in 1972. Actually, probably my first. Oh no, I had done one mural prior to that, but that was indoors, so that doesn't count. The first mural, outside mural I ever did was like in 1972 at the Estrada Courts projects. Very much recognized. Um, it doesn't longer exist. It was destroyed, and even right now there's a big effort to try to restore a lot of those murals. The Estrada Courts, they're pretty well known and pretty famous, as you know. It was as for people who don't know, it's Estrada Courts is a housing project. That mural that I did, I never completed it because it was too political and too radical for people. And it wasn't just the powers, the government that did it, but the organizers of those murals did not. They were, of course, seeking more funding, and they thought this was going to not be a conducive to for them solicited more funding. So they had me change. They had me censor some of my subject matter. And what the mural dealt with, actually, I don't know if you know this, but back in 1972, the Panacom papers got exposed, and people went to jail for that. Ellsberg, Alan Ellsberg, I forgot their name, Rusty. There were several people that went. It's sort of like the WikiLeaks of contemporary WikiLeaks situation, where people get a hold of these top secret information and expose it to the public. And in those documents, the Pentagon papers, it was exposed. A lot of things were exposed. The Allende overthrow in Chile, how the CIA, contributed to that, and several things. But among the many things that were exposed, one interesting thing that really stood out to me, especially because at that time we were involved in a committee to free 3 political prisoners called Committee to Free los Tres. And what stood out to me was it got exposed that 75% of all heroin coming into this country was coming through Air America Airlines, which is a military-run airline, CIA-run. Now, you could ask yourself, why would our own government be involved in drug trafficking? And so you can make your own conclusion. For me, I think that you have to realize from 1970 in the Chicano moratorium to 1972, there's a big thing that happened between there. In 1970, there was so much conscience raising that somebody told me actually that even the gangs at the time, because LA was known for being gang infested, especially those days. That in 1970 there was only one gang related death in that whole year, which is unheard of. 1972 comes around, and then there's a bunch of heroin, and then there's a bunch of drugs, what I call oppressive drugs, because you had your oppressive drugs and your mind expanding, your LSD, your all that kind of stuff. So there's a difference. So anyway, getting back to the mural, so it dealt with that. So it actually what you see in the mural is that, and the mural is called The Wonderful World of Corruption. And it was based because back in those days, there used to be a Sunday night program called The Wonderful World of Color, a Walt Disney program. So it was a takeoff of that. So in the mural, you see like a Mickey Mouse being in a conveyor belt, sort of introducing, being on stage with a spotlight on him that originally was coming from a helicopter, exposing this. And then what you see is a bunch of hypodermic needles with wings, like airplanes floating around. So you have to see the image. It's hard to explain, but you could see where people said it's too controversial. So I had to tone it down. And I think I'll show you a clip, or I'll send you a clip so you can see the difference. What was the final product and what the original design was.
Yeah. No, okay, that's
So
fantastic.
anyway, basically, I don't know if I answered your question, but some of my first murals in
Yeah,
LA.
yeah. So a lot of what you do is very is a very you know very international perspective. So you've actually had the opportunity to travel and do
Yeah,
art, kind of an ambassador of Chicano art in different places. You were in
yeah,
you were in, you were in Nicaragua at some point in time, right?
yeah. That's right. I was in Nicaragua in 1980, 1986, seventh anniversary of the triumph, Sandinista. Did a mural there.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little about that, and also tell us about the time you tried to sit in Daniel Ortega's chair?
How you, how you know that story?
Everybody knows that story.
Which one about Ortega's chair? Is that? Oh, you're kidding! I must have told you that story now. Oh God. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, in 1982, I was involved in Mecha, of course, and also with commemorating August 29. After the 10th anniversary, I was involved in the Chicano Moratorium Committee, uh, and I helped organize a delegation, a Chicano delegation, going to Nicaragua, like a fact finding tour to find out what was going on there. And so among the delegation, I also thought it was a good idea to leave a mural behind. So I also invited different Chicano murals, and there was other Chicano murals that went there. And we did a mural basically. Um, that's basically what happened. I'll send you a picture of the mural. Now, you want to hear the story about Ortega? Is that what you want? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was so funny because remember there was a war going on, and you had your war zones. We were in Managua, Nicaragua, and there was a lot of there was no their their civil what do you call it? The big theater, National Theater, was not open, so they had a big circus tent for these national kind of events, and different people were coming in them. And so I went. There was going to be a concert with Carlos Godoy, famous musician, and Peter, Paul, and Mary from the United States. There were going to be a concert, so I decided. Being that I was part of this delegation. I don't know how I got an access to a press badge. So I was able to go to different places, like special pass, like I was a privileged VIP type of person, and I had a video camera, so I was videotaping things. Uh, and so I decided to go to this concert, and got there a little early, and I noticed that in front of the stage there was like this roped off area. And so I said, well, I got this pass. Maybe they'll let me know. Maybe I'll go into this pass and be able to sit right in front of the stage, right? So the guards, the National Guards there was very little National Guards because they were really busy at the war zones. So they had made the chimorros, which were like teenagers to do security in the city of Namanagua, chomorros or whatever they used to call them. Anyway, so I went and sat down in this chair with this pass right in front of the stage, and this little chimorro, little security guard comes. He goes, real humble and real polite, and he goes, Mister Senor, you really can't sit here. This is reserved for special guests, right? And I mean, even if you have the pass. So I said, oh no, no problem. I didn't want to get on the problem. So I went to go sit down someplace else. So as the auditorium is being filled up, I noticed that there's this big entourage and a big group, and everybody's paying attention. And as they're walking, and so they go to where the chair where I was sitting, and actually it's Ortega, the national president, and his wife that sits in the same chair that I had been sitting. So can you imagine? I was sitting in the president's chair. so, so anyway, that's a funny story.
That is a funny story. That is a funny story. But that's incredible. How did can you expand a little bit about how those connections began from like being a celebrated artist within the Chicano movement to now all of a sudden being recognized internationally and being solicited to come out and represent. Can you tell us more about that story? Like how did that even happen?
How did that happen? I don't know. I mean, it just happens. I got a lot of too many murals under my belt, and each one has their own story, and it adds to the experience, and it adds to my influence. So what murals tend to do, because murals are in public places and you get community involved, they have a whole story on their own. Each one has a particular story, especially because of the geographical location. So uh, each one manifests itself differently, you know, from conceptual, from the concept of the theme to the actual execution. They all have different stories, and maybe we could do that in a different interview because each one has its own story. And you want to hear some for examples or something?
Well, yeah. The other one, the one I want to transition to is Cuba. Like, how did you start? How did you start?
Cuba was just a fun thing. Cuba was nothing even, I mean, even that political about it. Cuba was more a recent phenomenon, and we wanted to play solidarity to the Cuban people, and so it was just, and we wanted to have fun. So I organized this little group of artists, Chicano artists, and we did murals. Not too political, more cultural, more celebrative type of murals, and we did three murals. Yeah,
All right. Well, tell us about your work back here then. Tell us about your involvement with Spark.
with who? With Spark.
Yeah.
Oh, you knew about Spark too.
Yeah,
Okay,
I do my
Spark.
research.
What do you have something in front of you or something that you're going through?
I
I
got a
have to know
dossier.
about these
I got a
things.
file.
We got a whole file. A Spark, Social and Public Art Resource Center. That was just basically a participant. Judy Baca, kind of one of the founders of Spark. Judy Baca was the director of a program, a county parks round program called Citywide Murals Project, and they had an advisory board, and that advisory board basically became Spark, and it became a nonprofit, basically an organization to advocate public art in general. And Spark Social Public Art Resource Center, and I was one of the first when it first opened up. I was one of the first artists that that worked there. That's
That's a story. All right.
yeah.
Um,
So
story. All right. So moving to today, like you're working towards organizing for the Chicano 50th the 50th
moratorium.
graduation of the Chicano moratorium, and you are the chair of the artist committee,
Yeah, the Arts and Culture Committee. Yes.
the arts and culture committee. So tell us broadly about the 50th and what the goals are, and then tell us more specifically about what you're doing.
Uh, in an in a nutshell, the 50th is basically to commemorate the 50th anniversary, the historical importance and the legacy of the Chicano moratorium. And so it's the 50th, and we were rigging because before this COVID-19 and thing was happening, it was supposed to be a big event, and now it's going to be just a caravan, and we're going to postpone everything until later date. But among the many things that was planned leading up to that, my committee was organizing an art exhibition, actually a threefold exhibition: a photo, poster, and original art. And that's coming along, but it's going to be a virtual kind of exhibition that's in the making and should be up online pretty soon. So I would pass that information along. Um, and then that's all. I mean, what can I say? I think that it's important that we recognize this event, and the new generation gets exposed. I think that it's under the banner of Chicano, because I think that there's a new phenomenon, with the Latinx situation, and they don't want to, it's like I mean, people have this misconception that like the newcomers or new generation and the new migrants, that it sort of excludes them because Chicano means Mexican American. It is not just that; it's a state of mind. You have to realize where the Chicano concept comes about. It's just finding an identity, and not an identity to for because of the oppression, but also the psychological oppression. That you don't have an identity. So I think that's why it's important to commemorate and to recognize under the banner of Chicanismo that is basically a form of resistance to the dominant culture or the dominant forces. I mean, what can I say? That yeah, and a lot of times people look at Chicanismo very simply because of the fads, because of the dress styles, because of the music, because of the car clubs, and it's much more than that. That we have historically contributed many political contributions internationally when we're not basically a nation. We've been a colonized kind of a group of people. So there's a lot of reasons why it's important to keep that legacy alive.
Yeah. Well, I think what's really, I mean, like I don't want to get too far into this, but I think what's really important to remember is that at the heart of what's against the Chicano movement, a lot of it sounds very good and inclusive, but much of it is, when you dig deeper into it, much of it's very reactionary,
Yeah,
very well funded. I mean, like, and very, like, like the wheels turn real quick on a lot of this stuff. And it's backed by administrations, it's backed by news outlets, it's backed by
yeah.
people that move very quickly. And when you dig a little bit into what they really represent, we're talking about
Uh-huh.
Miami politics, essentially. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, of course.
look at like Romesco.
Yeah, no, no. And so you have to kind of realize, I mean, God, what I mean, we could that could be a whole program, a whole different
There's a
thing.
hesitancy to there's a hesitancy to say all that because it seems
Yeah.
like you're being defensive. It seems like
Yeah, yeah,
they
no,
don't
and
want
the
to
Chicanismo is like just a form, it's real simple. A lot of people try to explain why did they adapt this word Chicano back in the 60s. It's just the same thing as like your black movement, they don't want to be recognized as Negroes anymore. They wanted, I'm black and I'm proud. So it was a form of identity, you know. And so it's the same thing with Chicano, it was, we didn't want to be called just Mexican American, uh, and we don't want to, some of them, we're not migrants. We were already originally here in the Southwest. Um, and to adapt to any other terms that the system had provided for us, like Hispanic, it kind of negates our indigenous past, because Hispanic only means it's Spanish, but Chicanismo encompasses all that. What we're made of. With it's a holistic community and experience that has contributed to the making of America, and we are very much part of the American experience. That we're not foreigners. We're very much part of the Southwest uh, uh, atmosphere and environment.
no, very much the heart and soul of it, actually. So, uh, yeah. So, this has been a wonderful opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah.
I mean, is there aspects of your work that you want people to know about that we haven't covered yet?
No, no, no. I think it's too much. I heard that's a whole. It's a lot. But what I'll do, since we're coming closely down to this thing, I will send you references on whatever topics we said. I mentioned maybe the mural of the walkouts. Mentioned Nicaragua. I'll send that. I'll send. I send the Strata Courts mural. So that way you could have references to that. There's just too many. There's just too many. Each one has its own story. I have the largest mural in Seattle, Washington. That was an interesting story. Yeah, we did murals in El Salvador. The whole state of New Mexico. We have so tremendous amount of. One of the biggest commissions in the state of Texas was given to me early on, which is at the county courthouse, El Paso County Courthouse. So those things, those always have the whole stories on their own.
What did you paint on the courthouse?
The 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 we painted the history of the West Texas, southern New Mexico area, but with particular emphasis of parts of history not normally recognized. Because when people look now, contemporary, look at El Paso, they automatically think Anglo, Hispanic, Native American, Mexican American. But the little that people don't realize that we had a Chinatown, the Syrian community, the Jewish community. My own cousins across the border from El Paso, Texas, Ciudad Juarez, their second generation, well, their mom was first generation Chinese, married to a Mexican, so their name is Rosales Chong. So people don't realize that there's a lot of El Paso plays a very significant role in American history. It was the pathway to the north. That's why it's called Paso del Norte. People don't realize the historical. And the original Paso del Norte was actually where Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua is now. The El Paso, Texas, United States part used to be just farmlands, McGoffinsville, all that. It didn't become Ciudad Juarez until President Benito Juarez and his cabinet went there after being, persecuted by Maximilian. So there's a lot of historical. So anyway, the mural deals with the history of that area, and with special emphasis on parts of history that are not normally recognized. in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So what?
yeah, go ahead. There,
Was it,
there there's a video tube on it, so you wanna.
yeah, we'll drop the links below. So can you, yeah. So okay. So what advice do you have to young artists who are just want to get started and want to but don't feel as though.
Don't feel just to keep at it, to keep at it and to mix a little bit of both. A lot of artists, they know they're good because of their self uh, motivating factors, but you also have to know your academic and technical factors. So you have to kind of balance those things out. That's all. That's basically what I have. Um, yeah,
Yeah. So style and substance.
yeah.
Don't be short on either.
It'll be sure. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Carlos, it's been a wonderful hour spent with you. Really appreciate it. We're gonna drop all the links below, and I hope to see you and continue to collaborate with you. In the near.
Wonderful. Great, great. I'll call you back later and I'll send you those links or those images.
Yes. All right.
Uh,
Thanks,
Thanks.
Carlos.
All right.